Good afternoon. Get my mic a little closer. Thank you. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners for March the 2nd, 2023. And we're going to begin our meeting today with an invocation from Elder Brad Burton, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Linville. Thank you for being here.
Our Father in heaven, we bow our heads and give thee thanks this day. We give thee thanks for this rain that we've been blessed with. We give thee thanks for the many freedoms and opportunities that we enjoy in our lives. For this day that we have to meet together as leaders of this county and citizens to discuss the matters on the agenda. We give thee thanks for those that serve and work so hard to protect these rights and privileges that we have. We pray, Father, that thy Spirit will be with us this meeting, that there will be a spirit of unity as we discuss the various matters, that the voices and concerns of all affected can be considered as decisions are made. We pray for thy spirit of peace and protection over the citizens of this county. We are indeed grateful to be members of this, citizens of this country and of this state. We pray for this direction and guidance this day, and humbly do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Elder Brad Burton, for being with us today. Citizens who are interested in participating in the public session portion of the meeting via telephone, you may call 336-422-1200, and you will be placed on hold until the public session begins. That number again is 336-422-1200. And members of the audience who are interested in participating in the public session portion of the meeting, you need to fill out a speaker card and give it to our clerk, Ashley Matthews. And if you haven't done that, you can do it now. And we're going to begin our meeting with our COVID-19 update by Joshua Swift. Glad to see you today, Joshua.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I will, you do it? Have a brief report. So over the last 14 days, our cases in Forsyth County have decreased almost 50%. Also over that period, we've had a slight increase, 13% in the deaths. We've had 6 deaths that are COVID related over the last 2 weeks, and we only have 12 Forsyth County residents who are hospitalized in Forsyth County hospitals. Lab confirmed cases, you can see our numbers over the last year. And you can see that for the week of the 19th and 25th, we had 247 cases, and these are only lab confirmed cases. Our community level, as determined by the CDC, last Thursday went down to low. So individuals can wear a mask based on a personal preference, informed by their personal risk level. Also, we're still advising people to, if you have symptoms or a positive test or exposure to someone with COVID-19, you should wear a mask. We are still offering the COVID-19 vaccine at the Department of Public Health at Highland Avenue. Walk-ins are available. You can see those hours 5 days a week that we are offering vaccine. And then last, this is something I've shared with you. You know, as we're looking into the future, we know that the Federal Emergency Act will be ending in May. Our state vendor-supported testing will end March 30th. We have at-home test kits available, and we have also are working with a vendor from the CDC through the Department of Public Health here at the state to get a kiosk so we can have test kits available at no charge 24/7. Hope to have that on site this month on the Health and Human Services campus. And then, as I've shared before, vaccine will be commercialized, looks like June of 2023. We still don't have any definite as far as what the exact charge will be and how we'll handle that, but we're looking at that as we're planning for our next fiscal year budget. So that concludes my presentation. Be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for our health director? Thank you very much for your report. Appreciate the work that you and your staff continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
First item on the agenda is a public hearing to consider the expenditure of county general funds for an economic development project and authorizing execution of an agreement with Tex Tech Engineering Composites, LLC. And Kyle Haney is going to give us a review of that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So this is the item, briefed it under code name, but today with the public hearing, we will reveal the company's name. The item before you is an incentive for Tex Tech Industries. They are a company that's based in Kernersville. They manufacture specialty textile materials serving a variety of industries, aerospace, defense, medical, and many others. They currently have 265 employees across North Carolina, South Carolina, Utah, Maine, as well as offices in Europe as well. They are looking at expanding, and they are considering expanding here in Forsyth County or in Maine. If they choose to expand here, they would acquire or go to a new greenfield site off of 3300 Old Lexington Road and construct a 170,000 square foot new facility. Here's a summary of the investment and job creation that would come with this project if they chose to expand here. $41.7 million total in new capital investment between real property and machinery and equipment, as well as the creation of 59 new full-time jobs with an average wage of over $64,200. And you can see a breakout here of those positions. So a number of operators and those jobs would be created from 2023 through 2026. The item before you, the incentive to entice them to expand here, you can see is our standard 5-year, 50% of the tax base. And I like to mention this is the county's policy. They will create the jobs and pay the taxes before the incentives are paid. And then looking at this over a 10-year period, it's a 5-year incentive. The net taxes generated and kept over the 10-year period is 70% of those taxes. Finally, other incentives that are being considered, the City of Winston-Salem is considering a local incentive as well. North Carolina, the Commerce Department is also considering some grant funds, as well as North Carolina Community College with customized training. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Kyle? Thank you very much. This is a public hearing, and speakers will have up to 15 minutes to speak in favor of this request and up to 15 minutes to speak in opposition. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the petition? Come ahead, Laura Lee.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Laura Lee with Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. Thank you so much for your consideration of this project. We're grateful for the company's commitment to our community and growing within Forsyth County, and know that these quality jobs will be really impactful for the industry, but also for our community at large. And we want to thank you so much for the support of the opportunity in particular. And we do have a representative and executive of the company who is here along with their site consultant if you have any questions. Thank you.
Any other speakers that would like to say something in favor of this request? All right. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the petition? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion to approve this
Second.
economic development request for Tex Tech by Vice Chair Wisenhunt. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Plyler. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Looking forward to it. Thank you. Hope you come. I realize you have another choice, but I hope this helps you make the right choice. There you go. The second item on the agenda is approval of minutes for the meeting of February 16th, 2023.
Move approval.
Motion by Commissioner Plyler,
Second.
second by Vice Chair Wizenhut. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Madam Clerk, do we have any calls or cards for the public session?
Mr. Chairman, we do not.
No calls or cards. So, Mr. Manager, I think we're ready to continue
All right.
the remainder of the meeting.
Thank you, Chairman Martin. Good afternoon, board members and staff and guests. We do have some business items for consideration this afternoon. We have reviewed these in briefing sessions a couple of times, and hopefully we've answered all the questions that you might have, but we'll go ahead and dive into them. Have two budget and finance matters. Item 4 is an amendment to the 2022 PAYGO Capital Projects Ordinance. It appropriates funds for photovoltaic solar and other projects at Forsyth County parks and facilities. This moves up $100,000 out of budget reserve for this purpose.
Is there a motion? We have a motion by Commissioner Bessie, second by Vice Chair Wizenhut. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
All right, agenda item 5 is an amendment to the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget ordinance that appropriates funds for a detention staffing contract extension. Obviously, that's necessitated by the staffing challenges in the detention center. It brings in some private security into that facility.
I think you all recall, I'd just like to make a couple comments at the beginning, and I actually have a motion at the end, but in the comments is that just in speaking with our county manager, I actually talked about, he has the authority, because the discussion last week was all about whether or not to spend existing budget dollars in the sheriff's office, not whether to approve it, but just how to pay for it and how to adjust the budget. And actually, the county manager has the authority to approve unspent salary dollars for this particular contract until such time as there aren't any. And so, in a sense, we can actually do nothing until all those funds when it's clear they're going to be expended, then we would have the ability to take a look at a fund balance, payment. So I'd really like to make a motion that we basically table this item until such time that there is a need to spend dollars from the fund balance.
I'll second the motion.
We have a second by Commissioner Plyler. Any discussion? Yes.
Question.
Mr. Bessie.
I remember there was a similar option considered by the Winston-Salem City Council a couple of years ago of using a portion of salary savings in an area. As it turned out, the council did not do that because we learned that those theoretical salary savings were needed to pay overtime for existing staff. Mm-hmm. Have you had a chance to look at that to ensure that that's not going to be a problem in this case?
Yeah, and so it's a budgetary feature and kind of policy that the board and our offices kind of work through where I never, in rare cases, would I transfer lap salary savings because we actually appropriate fund balance and then have a lap salaries kind of contra revenue in the budget as well. And so, in normal times, our projection for reversions is really going to be that. And so, and I just, it's a rare case when I would do this. In this particular case, we know that the number of vacancies have been so great that there's room there, and this is just a really unusual case. And so, I feel comfortable. What it's going to mean is that Kyle and the budget office are going to have to just monitor this as the year progresses. Obviously, we don't want to get to June 30th and overspend salaries, and so we'll make sure that does not happen. But between the authority that I have to move it and talking with the county attorney, when y'all approved the original contract, you gave me the authority to do a one-year extension. And so both of these can be handled administratively. I'm really glad we had the conversation because I think it's important, but in this particular case, it works.
Well, how did we handle this last year? This contract was simply to deal with vacancies anyway. This is basically contracted detention center employees because we had so many vacancies to provide relief. And so it clearly is fulfilling the purpose of that the salaries were for. It's just happened to be contracted through a private entity. So how did we handle that? Because as I recall, we did this mid-year last year. And the belief was we were going to use lap salaries to cover it, and they did. They covered it for the remainder of that year, and in fact have covered it until this point. So as I recall, when that was set up, I don't recall a fund balance issue, a transfer in order to do that.
Right. We used salary savings last year as well. The board had to approve the contract last year, and so it had to come to you. And I think as a result, when we, as part of the contract approval by the board, I believe we did actually have a budget ordinance amendment to increase lap salaries countywide. I'm not positive, but I know that we did say we were going to use lap salaries last year, which is what we did. And actually, when we budgeted for the FY23 portion of the contract until February 28th, we reduced salaries as well. We reduced budgeted salaries by what we thought we would use this contract for through February 28th.
Got it. Yep. So I think, any additional questions?
Just a comment. I don't have any problem with postponing action on the request, but I would like to ask that staff check back with the sheriff's office to make sure that they weren't bringing the request forward in a different fashion now, because they did currently, unlike last year, need that lap salary revenue to cover overtime of existing staff. As I understand it, the private security contractor can do certain jobs but not others. And so let's double check, please.
Yes, sir.
And bring that back to us if it turns out, contrary to expectations, that might be the case this year. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I agree with Commissioner Bessie on that, too.
Got it. I think we're clear. And so we're ready now to act on the motion to table until such time as fund balance may be required. So is there any additional discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I'm all in favor. Motion carries unanimously.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We have 5 or 6 ARPA items. Hold on. So I'll dive into those. Item 6 is a resolution approving execution of an agreement with Old Salem Incorporated for restoration improvements to buildings related to Old Salem's Hidden Town project with American Rescue Plan Act funds. This would appropriate $391,875. And the facilities that would be improved are the Tavern Museum, the Volts Barn, the Bloom House, the Herbst House, and the Tavern Woodshed.
Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Motion approved by Commissioner Plyler. A second? Second by Vice Chair Wizenhut. Any discussion?
I do have a few points, Chair Martin. First, I just want to definitely thank the folk from over at Old Salem and Sure Harry for meeting to talk about the questions that I raised around the Hidden Town project and its connection with the Shotgun House project. And I think because the questions were raised, we were able to figure out where the miscommunications were and also where we could absolutely grow cooperatively in order to make Hidden Town a strong product for the citizens of Forsyth County. But I do want to just lastly say these few things that I think Hidden Town project is about the appropriation of culture and identity, and the best practices nationally is around making sure those whom it directly connects to have a strong voice and leadership in that process. Secondly, what I will say is that I feel wholeheartedly that I am a representative of all Forsyth County citizens, but the citizens of District A as constituents voted me in. And of course, primarily they are African Americans and directly connect to the Hidden Town project by, of course, being descendants of the enslaved and free people of African descent. So I wanted to make sure that the voice of the constituents were heard absolutely with this project. But lastly, and I think most importantly, it gives us an opportunity to leverage community cooperation and collaboration in order to complete the projects. And I would just ask the commissioners and the citizens to know that if you go on to the Hidden Town project that Old Salem Museums hosts, it specifically indicates that the Hidden Town project supports the Happy Hill Neighborhood Association and their focus on collaborative energy to foster renewal through recognition of history as well as arts of programming and community gardening. Significant efforts led by Triad Cultural Arts seeks to preserve culture and architecture through the Shotgun House project. So right even within the project, it talks about that collaboration. And I'm glad now that we are at a point, I believe, to synergize those entities so that we have a complete picture of Hidden Town. And I think that I am definitely at the place now where I can support the resolution in lieu of, I think, just, the miscommunication. Thank you.
Good. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously.
All right. Agenda item 7 is a resolution authorizing execution of an agreement with Legal Aid of North Carolina Incorporated to support its economic justice initiative to stabilize homeownership and opportunities for wealth with American Rescue Plan Act funds. You've got an associated budget ordinance amendment that appropriates $380,235 for this purpose, and it will provide community outreach and workshops and legal advocacy to support that mission.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion approved by Commissioner Plyler, second by Commissioner Bessie and Commissioner McDaniel. Any discussion?
Briefly?
Please, go ahead.
At our previous discussion of this, I asked for more information on the specifics. I got that information and have no problem concurring that this is a good project.
Great. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
All right, agenda item 8 is a resolution approving execution of an agreement with Community Care Center for Forsyth County Incorporated to hire 2 full-time staff to expand behavioral health services with American Rescue Plan Act funds. This has got an associated budget ordinance amendment that would appropriate $431,142 for this purpose.
Move approval.
Motion approved by Commissioner Plyler,
Second.
second by Commissioner McDaniel. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
All right, agenda item 9 is a resolution authorizing execution of an agreement with the Shalom Project Incorporated for the Flourish program to provide mental health counseling with American Rescue Plan Act funds. You've got an associated budget ordinance amendment that appropriates $50,000 for mental health services and additional outreach.
Move approval.
Approved by Commissioner Plyler,
Second?
second by Commissioner Bessie. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
All right, agenda item 10 is a resolution approving execution of an agreement with Smart Start of Forsyth County to support Pre-K Priority Coalition in Forsyth County with American Rescue Plan Act funds. You've got an associated budget ordinance amendment that appropriates $3.7 million for resources and services for 30 pre-K classrooms.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion approved by Commissioner Plyler, second by Commissioner McDaniel. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Well, we have a number of contracts that have been reviewed by the board. Item 11 is a resolution by the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners authorizing execution of opioid settlements and approving the supplemental agreement for additional funds between the state of North Carolina and local governments on proceeds related to the settlement of opioid litigation. You heard from our county attorney on these, and these would be agreements with Walmart, Teva, Allergan, CVS, and Walgreens.
Move approval.
Motion approved by Commissioner Plyler,
Second.
second by Commissioner McDaniel.
Yes.
Yes. Make sure I heard that correctly. Any discussion? I just like this. The one question I have is when will those dollars, will they start? This is year one of 18?
The deadline for local governments across the country is April 18th. After that, the defendants will have a period of time to decide if they've gotten enough positive responses. Presumably that will happen, and so not sure exactly when the money will start flowing, but maybe September or so.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Chairman, if I may interrupt you for a moment, and I apologize for this. I should have recused myself during the vote for Smart Start because I do sit on the board, so we will need to revisit that if you don't mind, please.
Mr. Attorney, you think we should just simply repeat the vote or just indicate?
I think that'd be wise to just do the vote again and note in the minutes Commissioner McDaniel's recusal.
Thank you.
We'll return to item 10, the Smart Start ARPA grant proposal. And I'll just start from the very beginning. Do we have a motion to approve?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Plyler. I'll be glad to second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Without my vote,
And the minutes will reflect
like such.
the
Thank you.
the no vote by Commissioner McDaniel.
Very good.
All righty, we're at
Yep. Agenda item
item
12.
12.
Is a resolution authorizing the purchase of contraceptive devices and pharmaceuticals with Title 10 family planning services funding under Medicaid 340B pricing in the amount of $129,612.
Move approval.
Motion approved by Commissioner Plyler,
Second.
second by Commissioner McDaniel. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Agenda item 13 is a resolution awarding and authorizing execution of an agreement with Wake Forest University Baptist Medical Center to provide wellness services. This is basically part of our internal service fund for health services and part of our self-funded insurance plan. It's a 3-year agreement not to exceed $2,384,133.
Move approval.
Motion approved by Vice Chair Wizenhunt. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner McDaniel. Any discussion?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
In this particular item, did the low bid go to Atrium instead of Novant?
So, it was a services contract, and the bid from Atrium was a little bit higher, but as staff ranked it, it was about $50,000 over 3 years, I believe.
And that's my question. Why would we award a contract with the taxpayers' money to pay an additional $50,000 when Novant was the low bidder?
At the staff level, staff believed that it was just it was a better response, and we've had experience with both Novant and Atrium, and as we compared our experience, we believed it was appropriate action.
I'd like to ask the attorney a question. I serve on the Novant board, and I favor giving that contract to Novant. Should I recuse myself?
Yes, you should if you serve on their
Okay,
board.
consider it done.
All righty. With that said, with Commissioner Plyler recusing himself, we have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? Mr. Chairman?
Well, I don't think he can first.
Well, one at a time. Commissioner Bessie.
Just a quick note. It's my understanding from discussion with staff that part of the difference is that it's anticipated that Atrium would provide more staff for the service than Novant had anticipated providing.
That is correct, Commissioner Bessie.
So in part, I gather that the staff evaluation that it was a better bid dealt with effectiveness of service provision.
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I think just in general, we've used this as some learning opportunities around how we bid and what process we go through to bid services, because we received a number of applications, and they varied. This was not buying a standard product across all these jurisdictions, and so it really was about which one is the most value in it, and so in the future we will. We're working with purchasing, and we're going to use a a mechanism that's actually, the general statutes don't require that we competitively bid services at all. We believe that we should, because you've got to know what that marketplace looks like, but those really should be bid informally and not really subject to the.
I hear what you're saying. My concern is if we announce to the general public whom we serve that this is a bid process and someone puts a low bid in, then we go back and look at how they're going to carry it out. And if Novant knew that was an open, in my opinion, an open question, they could add 2 or 3
Commissioner,
people.
Commissioner, if you've recused yourself, you shouldn't be
I'm
discussing
sorry,
this.
I apologize. I take back everything, Mr. Manager.
I got it. I think we all sort of understand the issues. What Commissioner Plyler's talking about is really a matter of probably how the proposal itself was structured, the request for proposals. And the very fact that, I realize you could talk about, yes, we want to have individual coaching sessions for our employees, for X number, then we've had this many signed up in the past, and I'm assuming that our request for proposals included a description that basically described the services that we desired. Then it does strike me as a little odd that Novant would bid where they were not able to provide the wellness coaching, for example, for employees with fewer staff. I mean, that's kind of it probably has to do with a ratio of employees to coach, for example, which is which all gets into how many hours the people work. And so, for example, if both agree they're going to do it, and one's going to have people will see 25 people and one's going to see 50, there are going to be differences in cost, but they're still going to get their coaching. I guess there's a lot of issues in that, I think.
I called the question, Mr. Chairman.
Good. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. Motion carries 5-1. There you go.
All right. Agenda item 14 is resolution awarding a contract to Dreambuilt Incorporated for construction of the Fleet Addition project. This is a contract not to exceed $939,700, and it's really going to support the co-location of the fleet there at the Linville Center with the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Board of Education. So there's some real benefits to this project.
Move approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Plyler. We have a second by Commissioner Linville. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Agenda item 15 has several parts to it. Item A, or Part A, is a resolution authorizing execution of an amendment to the contract between Forsyth County and Davie Construction Company for the public safety upfit project. Item B is the associated amendment to the 2022 PAYGO Capital Projects Ordinance that transfers funds from inflation contingency for the Public Safety Center upfit project. And then you've got the amendment to the 2020 PAYGO Capital Projects Ordinance to accept a transfer to facilitate the projects in an amount of not to exceed $1,489,057. And it is for the third floor upfit project, which will move the sheriff's offices to the third floor of that building, which is currently an unfinished space. That's going to facilitate the co-location of the City of Winston-Salem's 911 center beside our current 911 center, and then a little bit of an expansion there, and then our joint emergency management will basically get a little bit more space up out of this. And so it's a good collaborative project with the City of Winston-Salem, kind of all the way
Move
around.
approval.
Motion approved by Commissioner Plyler. We have a second. Second by Commissioner McDaniel. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
All right, item 16 is a resolution selecting a landscape architecture firm and authorizing the execution of a contract to provide landscape architecture services for the Horizons Park Multimodal Nature Trail project. It's an amount not to exceed $76,500. Jordan Consultants was the recommended vendor.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion approved by Commissioner Plyler, second by Commissioner Bessie. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Items 17 and 18, you can probably take together. They're both tax matters. 17 is a resolution approving refunds by the tax assessor collecting the amount of $346.38. And then item 18 is a resolution approving refunds in the amount of $13,954.29 from the North Carolina Vehicle Tax System.
Move approval to items 17 and 18.
Motion approved by Commissioner Platter, second by Commissioner Linville. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
All right, you got two reports. Item 19 is the January 2023 contribution-based benefit cap report, and item 20 is the fuel surcharge franchise report, and it did remain at $1.02.
Move approval.
Approved by Commissioner Platter. Second by Commissioner Linville. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Need a motion to adjourn the regular meeting, and we'll be immediately ready to reopen the briefing.
Move to adjourn the regular meeting.
All right, motion by Commissioner Platter, second by Commissioner McDaniel. We stand adjourned.
Already.
All righty, we're ready to start our March 2nd, 22. You need a break? Yes, sir. Okay, take 5. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Within 5 minutes, I think we did pretty good. All righty. We will call the March 2nd, 2023 briefing to order. And this is actually the briefing for the Thursday, March 16th, 2023 meeting, 2 weeks away. We do have one discussion item, which I assume we'll do at the end, which is a recap of our winter work session by our county manager. And now, just to give us a quick overview of each of the items, and I think we actually have the first one, we will be hearing a presentation because we agreed we would hear all plan and zoning presentations for the public hearing issue coming up. So I'll turn it over to you, County Manager.
All right, sure. Yeah, as is our practice, anything requiring a public hearing, we're going to go ahead and brief fully. So, and this is a planning matter that does, so I'll turn it over to Chris Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, members of the County Commissioners. We did, this is UDO CC 17, which we briefly talked about whenever I gave my quarterly update back in early to mid-February. UDO CC 17 is a request that was in response to the Winston Weaver fire, aimed at achieving greater land use protections for potentially harmful industrial uses. The proposed regulations before you follow extensive research and discussions with both the Public Works Committee of the City of Winston-Salem, which was the Winston Weaver Task Force, and with the Planning Board. Just a little bit of background and history. The Winston Weaver plant fire was in early 2022, actually January 31st of 2022. It led staff to assess the city's current land use regulations for such facilities. Staff researched how North Carolina peer communities address fertilizer plants through zoning restrictions and other requirements. There are the peer communities that we looked at: Cumberland, Durham, Guilford, Mecklenburg, and Wake counties, along with the cities of Charlotte, Durham, Fayetteville, Greensboro, and Raleigh, which are the largest cities in those respective counties. Fertilizer plants, generally speaking, are only allowed in the community's heaviest industrial zoning district. It's classified as some form of chemical or high-impact hazardous manufacturing. Additional use restrictions of note that we found looking at our peer communities deal with special use permit or special use district zoning approval, enhanced setbacks from residential districts or from property lines, perimeter security walls and fences, hazardous materials management plans, and water supply watershed restrictions. These are, again, I'm not going to go over this table in detail, and I did note whenever I was preparing for this that the staff report that came over had what we compared to our city peers, but not our county peers. But this information I will send over separate. This is the chart looking at the how we compare to our respective counties. But as you can see, it's kind of a mixed bag, but a lot of them do have regulations similar to either what we already have or what we are proposing that would put us kind of within the realm of what our peer communities are doing. Current UDO regulations: fertilizer plants are currently classified as chemical manufacturing based on the North American Industrial Classification System, or NAICS. Chemical and battery manufacturing are 2 of 13 uses classified as manufacturing C. And manufacturing C is only allowed in the most intensive zoning district for industrial, which is the general industrial district. Any use involving manufacture of hazardous materials within 1 mile of Salem Lake is subject to the watershed protection regulations and is prohibited. The proposed use restrictions and use specific standards that we are proposing with this text amendment. Proposed regulations would apply only to the following subset of manufacturing C, which would be chemical manufacturing uses that may involve ammonium nitrate, such as pesticides, fertilizer, and agricultural chemical manufacturing, and explosives and pyrotechnics manufacturing. Those are specifically from the NAICS manual, and as well as battery manufacturing uses that may involve lithium, which are primary battery manufacturing and storage battery manufacturing. Some other site-specific standards would only apply to new manufacturing uses in the aforementioned chemical and battery manufacturing categories permitted after the effective date of this ordinance. Permitted only in the GI district through special use district zoning. Again, would require the filing of a hazardous materials management plan that would be submitted as part of the issuance of a building permit. None of these uses would be allowed in designated public surface water supply watersheds, such as Salem Lake. A 25-acre minimum site size would be required, and there would be minimum setbacks from the property line for all operations of 400 feet, but you could have parking as close as 100 feet to the property line. A minimum 6-foot-high security fence or wall would be required to surround these facilities around the exterior property lines. And landscaping, there would be standard landscaping provisions that would apply to all sites, but then all street yard landscaping areas would be located outside of the security fence or wall to not make it appear to be a fortress, kind of soften that edge. A little bit behind the process, the planning board did spend several meetings vetting the research and draft recommendations that staff brought to them. We did keep Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. In the loop as we were reviewing these recommendations and as we actually developed the actual ordinance, and there were no concerns that were raised. The adopted version and the proposed version that's before you today are not out of line with the regulations of our peer communities. A public hearing was held by the Planning Board on October 13th, 2022. There were no speakers in either opposition or in support. Following the public hearing, the Planning Board did vote 6-2 to recommend approval, and as was asked last time, the two that voted against it, one voted against it because they thought the regulations went too far, and one voted against it because they thought the regulations didn't go far enough. So following that, this was adopted by the City Council on December 5th, 2022. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. I do have some other slides off the end if there are some questions that come up that I may have anticipated needing to answer, but I'm not sure that I've anticipated every question.
Commissioner Bessie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that we discussed the extension of what was originally aimed at a specific type of fertilizer manufacturing to include batteries. As I recall our conversation during the planning session, it appeared that the actual language of the amendment did not limit the battery manufacturing uses that would be affected to those involving lithium. Is that correct, or does the language specifically require that it be battery manufacturing involving lithium?
I never want to.
It is not limited.
I was going to say, I never want to answer a question without looking at it, but I'm 99% sure that it is not limited to just lithium. It would be all primary or storage battery manufacturing.
Right. And with that in mind, I gather that staff is preparing an amendment for possible consideration that would remove, for the time being, pending additional review, would remove the inclusion of battery manufacturing from this particular action.
Commissioner Bessie, based on an earlier conversation I had with the county attorney whenever we discussed when this was coming back, he did let me know that there were some concerns specifically with battery manufacturing being a part of this. I've already asked Steve Smotherman on our staff, who's our kind of industrial guru, to go back and revise this language to remove that section to give you an option. So if that is something that the board would like to see, we can bring that for the briefing next week, and I'll get that information over to the county clerk.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. I definitely would like to see that amendment. I feel it's, I think it's an economic development consideration, and I agree with Commissioner Bessie that at least we should have an amendment offered, and I would appreciate you doing that.
And again, I think from a staff perspective, whenever when we initially drafted the regulations initially, we were very broad, and then we narrowed them down as we had discussions, and we ended up on these two because of the potential battery manufacturing, especially dealing with lithium as far as explosions, but also just the fact that there are a lot of hazardous chemicals, materials, contamination, and things associated with battery manufacturing. But from a staff perspective, if we had to choose, we would prefer that an ordinance get adopted specifically addressing the fertilizer manufacturing, and we would, again, we would be fine if that is what eventually got adopted.
And I thought that was the purpose of this UDO, was to fertilize. Thank you.
You are correct.
Other questions for Chris?
Chairman, I do. So it looks like this was adopted by the city council on December the 5th, right? So I can only assume that it was a unanimous decision, a vote?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm 99% sure. I will verify before the next briefing, but I don't remember any dissension amongst the city council.
And with this, is maybe an in the weeds question, but I'd like to know if there are any other businesses that are grandfathered under what Weaver had, and are we addressing those businesses with this UDO?
I can answer that question. There are no other fertilizer manufacturers.
Not even the fertilizer. I'm saying, are there any other businesses with potential risk or issues that we might need to look into in terms of the city? Like I said, it was an in the weeds question.
I will answer that question one way, and again, we can always do research. As far as, part of the problem with the Winston Weaver in and of itself was the fact that it was built in 1939.
Sure.
And of course, it was built under the building code at the time, the fire code at the time. There were no regulations. As I mentioned it actually wasn't even an incorporated Winston-Salem. It was in Forsyth County, and it was constructed at a time where there weren't even any zoning regulations, and the counties didn't even have authority to have zoning regulations.
Wow.
So whenever you look at kind of the circumstances with Winston Weaver, it was kind of a perfect storm related to, and thank God nothing, that it was contained. But given those set of circumstances, it was particularly egregious. What I would say is, we actually asked that question of our city fire personnel because it was planning and zoning staff, which included the planning side of the house, the inspection side of the house, and city fire whenever we were reviewing regulations related to Winston Weaver and the drafting of these regulations, and whether or not there were other time bombs sitting out there.
Right.
The thought process was there aren't any out there as severe as this, but again, whenever you look at how things are constructed over time, there very well may be some out there that don't have the life safety things in place,
Right.
but they're not necessarily this severe, correct?
Yeah, and that's the premise of my question is we're working on this, but we need to be working on additional things down the line. And I wanted to make sure that this is addressing that in the future.
And one of the things, and again, not to belabor the point drastically, but a lot of the research that we did went back and looked at the West Texas fire in the late 2000s. And not just fire, explosion at a fertilizer plant. And, the conclusions that came out of that report was that there needed to be federal guidelines and changes made at the federal level that dealt with fertilizer manufacturing and other types of explosive manufacturing that had explosive type materials in them. Of course, it looked good in a report, but nothing was ever done. And similarly, from a fire and building code perspective, we are somewhat tied to when the structure was built as far as what can be required. And if they do an addition, we can require that addition to meet today's standards, but we can't go back and retrofit existing businesses. So the only tool we have in the toolbox is zoning regulations at this point, unless there would be something done at the state or federal level. So again, we can go back and see if there is anything else, and perhaps I can bring that forward at my next quarterly update if there is anything else that potentially could be out there. But we tried to cast a fairly broad net when we did this, which is, again, how we end up with battery manufacturing in there. It was our thought process that there weren't any other manufacturing outfits that probably needed to fall under this net.
Well, that was helpful. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Any other questions for Chris?
Thank you.
All right. So the remainder of the agenda is pretty straightforward. I always can get myself in trouble saying that we've got a fairly simple agenda ahead, but a lot of just sort of routine business items. We've got 3 budget and finance items that are part of this. You've got an amendment to the 2022 PAYGO Capital Projects Ordinance. Essentially, that appropriates out of that $250,000 for an ambulance that was part of that action when you took it last year. You've got an amendment to the fiscal year 2023 budget to appropriate revenue from the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council grantees to reimburse unspent funds. You know, that's always a challenge to try to make sure that all those agencies spend every single dime that flows through that. I will say that when you see that next week, they're pretty small dollar amounts, and so we'll keep working on that, but you'll see that on next Thursday. Item 5, you got an amendment to the 23 budget ordinance to increase revenues and appropriations for the health department. That's an additional $40,504 that's flowing through the state for those purposes. You've got 1 grant item with the Appalachian Health District Health Department that would appropriate $29,555 as part of that grant amount.
Dudley, if you don't mind,
Sure.
I'm sorry for slowing you down a tad bit. I just wanted to go back and revisit number 4 relative to the unspent funds for the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council. And some of the questions that I have is relative to the individuals that we support.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the design that we are considering, even with special appropriations, to maybe look at that group, make some recommendations in terms of, you know, I know we continue to talk about outcomes, but maybe we need to allow others to have access to those opportunities as well, and maybe they can spend the money that those other folks can't.
Yeah, there's been a lot of work being done on that.
Yeah, you know, I can answer that. So what I will say, there is an open application process for Juvenile Crime Prevention Council funds, and we received no new applications this cycle. And so all of the agencies that are going to be recommended for next budget year will end up being the same agencies. But we have advertised it, we have a really broad range, especially when we were doing Cure Violence. Like, we have a massive distribution list, lots of grassroots organizations and various, and we did not receive new applications. But we have decrease the amount of funding for several organizations based on measures, outcomes, and those types of things. So it is high on our radar. We are definitely tracking measures and outcomes. Certainly, I would encourage any of you to join the JCPC meetings, because it's very passionate conversations that occur between the council and those that we are funding, because we do want to maximize the resources. But for these, a lot of them have to do with, some of the items that we are required to fund, like a temporary shelter for individuals that are in the Department of Juvenile Justice. There weren't as many that needed it, and so kind of at the very last minute, when they're estimating how much of the funds they're going to need to provide the emergency shelter, they didn't need quite as much. And so they're going to be returning, like $300 some because of that. For the Work It, Earn It program, which is restitution, again, you don't know how many people are going to need that. So there's various reasons, psychological assessments, that it's hard when it's coming down to the wire. They're estimating an amount, and then when it's crunch time, it just doesn't quite balance in the way that we would like.
Yeah.
But we can talk more about that next week.
I was going to say, I'll make some recommendations the next time that I go to the meeting, because I think we've been here a couple of years now, and I don't want to keep doing that. But I'm done. Thank you, Dudley. I appreciate it.
And I think next week, I'll be interested in seeing whether the same organizations that basically had reversions are the same organizations with reversions this year. And particularly, I'm kind of curious when there's a reversion, and it sounds like these are small amounts, but whatever percentage is going for overhead, indirect cost, or whatever, I'm hoping that's being adjusted properly to make up for that. And it would also seem to me that the part that is money that ends up being potential reversion ought to end up being indirect cost kind of issues, or there should be some impact on that. But if the grants, I assume, are very narrow, like the only thing we're going to do is on restorations of whatever it is, and that's all it is with some overhead, then you really can't control all that, except to say, once you make a mistake once or twice, then you award less because of those things, because you're obviously you're overestimating the quantity that you can complete, or that will be
Yeah,
needed.
that's correct. I mean, perfect example is the emergency shelter. You're going to see we're allocating less dollars to them, or we're recommending allocating less dollars to them for FY24 because they did not need as much this year. But we do try to reallocate dollars to other agencies. But again, when you're coming down to crunch time in June, it's just in some cases too late, right? So like right now, we're working on reallocating dollars for FY23 so that we minimize the impact at the end of this fiscal year.
Yeah, and we obviously could change the date to an earlier date from which you base your plans on this, because at this point, depending on where you are, if you don't have something in the queue to get done, we're taking your money to reallocate, 6 weeks before the end or something to those organizations that really could spend it with that. I mean, I think there's got to be a way. It doesn't sound like there's much money involved here, but it's still, nothing is worse, in my opinion, than reverting dollars for grant projects.
Agreed. And the last thing I will say, I don't want to belabor it, is, the time that we have to reallocate the dollars, the date is way earlier than we would like, and that has to do with the state's requirements, because these are state funds. And so, we will be discussing reallocations at our next meeting. I don't know if it's later this month or next month, but then that is it for the year. So even if we know there is a possibility in May or June, we will not have the time to reallocate any more dollars the way that the state's process is working. But I'll have our state consultant here next week, because he could also help to answer some of those questions.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Very good.
I think we're back to ARPA's.
Yep, back to ARPA. We got 2 ARPA matters. We're narrowing down on most of these agreements. I'll ask Aisha next week to talk about what's still out there in front of you. But you got 2 matters. Item 7 is a resolution approving execution of agreement with Moji Coffee for some work that they are doing, and then with the Salvation Army for emergency financial assistance to disproportionately impacted residents. So Aisha will review both of those. We have 3 contracts that will be discussed next week. You've got a resolution authorizing amendment to the Behavioral Health Crisis Services Revenue Agreement. Just a reminder, that's that significant state appropriation that we got 2 years ago, $12.5 million as part of a $25 million appropriation that was split between us and Mecklenburg County. And essentially, there's some budget revisions that we'll be making to that. You've got the purchase of cellular services and equipment from Verizon Wireless using state contract pricing for the health department. And then the last contract matter is a resolution authorizing a contract between Forsyth County and EPR Systems for something called Fireworks Record Management Software. And that is actually, the board created the overlay district for the volunteer fire departments. And we've been looking at, are there appropriate things to pay out of that overlay district that really shouldn't be paid out of the volunteer fire department's budgets? And for years, the volunteer fire departments, different departments would buy kind of different services through Fireworks, but that's their reporting system, and there really is some benefit for us to be the contracting agent for that for all those volunteer fire departments. Makes a ton of sense. And you'll hear from the fire guys. They're back there now, but they'll talk about that next Thursday. You've got some refunds that are out there. And then you've also got reports. Well, in item 14 is the thing that everybody looks forward to, where you pass a resolution acknowledging receipt of the tax collector's report and the total amount of unpaid 2022 taxes that are liens on real property, and ordering the tax collector to advertise that so that the world can know and see all of that. And so that will, John will talk a little bit about that. And then you've got some reports, and you'll notice the property tax, the state property tax commissions actually acted on some of the appeals we had from some of the large big box stores. And so he can talk a little bit about the impact there. And I think our attorney's office and the tax office together have worked really hard to try to keep those values where they need to be, and really argued that with the Property Tax Commission. So, like I say, pretty straightforward agenda for the regular meeting there on March 16th, Mr. Chairman. So, unless there's any questions about the agenda, I can just kind of wrap up with the winter work session takeaways. Okay, all right. Chantel, do you mind dropping that one-page kind of summary on the Elmo, and then we'll kind of jump through that a little bit. You've got a copy in front of you. I thought that we've done a lot of winter work sessions over the years, and I thought the session that we had the other Thursday was really was a good conversation. We talked around kind of three main areas: economic development, emergency services, and finance, budget, and sort of the HR, the administrative components. And so what you've got in front of you is what staff heard in those discussions as kind of marching orders for us to work on. And so under economic development, what we heard is there really was consensus on the need to identify future employment centers in Forsyth County, and the need to balance growth and conservation and community character, kind of the whole smart growth thing. And so what we heard was staff is directed to identify potential employment centers, maximizing and optimizing land use, transportation, utilities, and other factors, including sort of demand side considerations in that. And so that team of presenters actually is working on that, and hope to get you something fairly soon around those areas. Any questions on the economic development front?
Mr. Chairman? Sure. Just to comment, we were discussing industrial parks and what was available and the size categories. Tanglewood Industrial Park was referenced, and the question I think I probably raised the question about whether they did have actual rail access to an active track. As it turned out, the answer is yes, that there is a trestle going across the Yadkin that would drop down, and you could ultimately connect to either Salisbury. You could go all the way to Charlotte on a track there. So that's noteworthy, and that it appears to me that would be. We had later a discussion about the rail corridors, that would be the route that they were thinking of when when the NC DOT included a Winston-Salem to Charlotte corridor as a possible passenger rail extension. So
that's cool. That'd be going right through off of Tanglewood, right by the business park, right to Charlotte.
But I thought that was interesting as a sort of a short-term follow-up to the discussion. We also got letters of support from the City of Winston-Salem, from Piedmont Authority Regional Transit, and the COG for further consideration of those two passenger rail corridor expansions, the Winston-Salem to Raleigh and the Winston-Salem to Charlotte, and that was all moving fast because of the deadline.
It is. That's good. I think the country has an opportunity to have $66 billion to be spent on rail expansion for passenger service. So that's a pretty big issue.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Any other comments on the economic development item? All right, so we will get busy on that and get that back to you. In the emergency services arena, really what we heard from the board was keep providing data around this, and a lot of this will inform us as we go into the FY24 budget. But what we heard is gather unit hour utilization from available counties, really to try to put a context around where we are, and then also, obviously, if you compare unit hour utilization and vacancies, point in time vacancies for other counties, I think that's relevant. And then, acknowledging there is shifts make that different. So if a 12-hour shift has some expectations around it that 24-hour shifts don't, and around unit hour utilization. So we'll work on that. review the cost. We talked a little bit about standby events and the way those impact our emergency services. So we said review the cost. What we heard is review the cost of standby events to determine in part which events for which to provide standby coverage and reevaluate as staffing improves. Obviously, if staffing, we get unit hour utilization, there's more opportunities for working standby things. Those are actually morale builders because our employees like going to those kinds of events. And so at this point, we can adjust unit hour utilization, also recoup some of our costs through the event side. We heard from board members around more community outreach to assist citizens with determining when it is appropriate to dial 911. Now that we've got a communications arm of county government, we actually had a conversation this morning about where to get that embedded and how to do that. And so we are off and running on that. I want to report on the top 10 EMS call types, both countywide and within those hot spots that Carr had identified in that presentation. And additional detail on call response locations. That one we wrote down. I don't remember exactly what that was. If you remember, I was thinking it was sort of the same way of saying the thing above it, the report on the top 10 EMS call types. But if we need to be more focused on that, let me know. The last two, identify the community health disparities and correlate on those impacts on call data. And we thought about being able to check with lots of resources we have, not the least of which is the neighborhood community atlas, to try to make some determination there. And then obviously appropriate requests need to continue to update the board on progress toward addressing these challenges. And so we will keep that in front of you. You'll see it and hear it again at budget time. And hopefully we'll continue to make progress. So those were the ones on emergency services. What did we miss, if anything?
I think you covered it.
Okay.
I just, when you mentioned our communications part, I've really appreciated these the last 2 Fridays, we've gotten updates from Ed McNeil about all the things that they're doing in the communications department, which have been a lot of stuff going on. I appreciate that constant reminder of those every Friday. So I'm really pleased with that.
Great.
And obviously this is a big topic that we can really work on, throughout the year, on the 911, understanding that.
I didn't know he was sending those to you, but I'm glad he is. So very good. That's great. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'd ask him to give me kind of a Friday report, and so you'll for that very purpose. So anything else? All right, and then finally, finance budget, kind of that world. We had a number of marching orders here. First one was to work with Winston Forsyth County Schools CFO to determine how the Article 46 is characterized in their fund balance. Kyle has reached out to their office to get that report and let them know that we're interested in that. I think have you confirmed if he's going to be here next Thursday?
I have not heard back yet, no.
Okay, so we've actually invited to him, hopefully with all that information next Thursday. We have not heard from him, but we will stay after him to see if we can get him in to basically present that report. In the area of special appropriations, it's kind of a policy change. And so what the direction we heard is to set aside the funds in the FY24 recommended budget for special appropriations as a reserve. And so we will place those in a reserve in the manager's recommended budget. And then the Board of Commissioners will decide appropriate funding levels against that, the number of folks and the folks who have applied. We will need to get you those special appropriations and the amounts and what they ask for in that detail in advance, obviously. And that may be one of the areas that we can go ahead and kind of make some pre-budget decisions so you're not faced with all that when we hand you that budget in mid-May or whatever. And so we already do that with some behavioral health. You make some of those behavioral health recommendations that way, and we'll do that one as well. So kind of outside of the process. I see some head nods. That's good. There was an item that basically said review the Winston Forsyth County Schools funding compared to the formula for the last 2 years, so we can provide sort of a summary of historical funding for the schools, and we'll try to get that report out to you again in advance of dumping the school's budget on top of you. Obviously, the schools and the community college both come to the board and with their submitted budgets in May. And so those roll into the manager's recommended budget and the alternate service level budgets. And so, but we should be able to have that data because we usually get the school's budget a little bit earlier than you do, but not by much, like a week, and then before they show up. So we'll get that to you. We heard that when we were moving forward with maximizing the 2/3 bonds issuance this year, and knowing that the board can decide whether or not to sell the whole amount, depending upon kind of where discussions go with Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools around their needs and kind of a future strategy for bond issuances. So we're off and running on that. In terms of the discussion from HR, we heard further evaluate exit interview data by departments and try to identify other trends and kind of track year over year. You've also got our commitment because we are working on it, but to try to get as much exit interview data as we can. So we've actually met to talk about what steps can we take when folks leave us to try to really mine as much information about why they're leaving us as we can and take sort of an extra effort to get that information so that we can understand better where there are management and supervision kind of issues, what the nature of them are, and really help get to the source so we can understand what management actions need to be taken. We'll share a copy of the employee satisfaction survey. Question was the Board of County Commissioners. We are on target to do another employee satisfaction survey this fall. We actually talked about it a little bit this morning. This is the year where we're actually going to do the community survey. We did the community survey in 21, so this fall we'll do another community survey. Probably that very much looks like the one we want to be able to compare the year-over-year data, and so it will look pretty much like the 21 survey, and then we'll also be doing that internal employee survey. So, and then the last, attempt to measure the retention impact of compensation changes, which is tricky because it's very fluid. But obviously, if we the board's taking a number of really important actions to move salaries, and we do need to measure that. And since we've got a fairly extensive impact from the Lockton study, we will be measuring that. You have to infer a little bit how much salary had to do with that. I mean, the other thing we do know is that the labor market actually has been improving kind of steadily for a little bit, and so, which is good news. And so, how much of the impact was labor markets becoming a little more, when I say labor market improving, I guess from the employee standpoint, the labor market's getting worse if it tightens up, but from the employer perspective, obviously a little less tight labor market brings more applications in and a little less pressure. So depends on how you look at that. But anyway, that was, like I said, from a staff perspective, we got together and thought it was hopefully a really good a good session. Hopefully y'all felt like it was a great use of your time, and we can go into the budget this year with a little more strategic focus than we would have had otherwise. And Mr.
Good
Chair,
summary. I thought it was a good meeting. Anything for the good of the order?
Yes, sir, I do have two. I wanted to mention about the Forsyth County Association of Educators. We're meeting with them on March the 22nd. It will be our special meeting. It's March 22nd again from 6 to 8 p.m. and it's going to be at the Central Library. So for those individuals wanting to participate, we'd like to for you to participate. And lastly, thank you, Gloria, for being my eyes today. I see a special guest in the forum today, which is the Honorable Commissioner Fleming Elamine. So we wanted to recognize you as well, sir. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Chairman. That's all that I have.
I can almost see him.
Mr. Chairman, I have some information for the manager and also the board too. Mr. Manager, I saw earlier this week that the U.S. Mail Service is going to buy 9,000 electric delivery vehicles, not not real, just delivery vehicles like you see now, 9,000. I don't know where they got any of them yet or not. I don't know whether Ford makes the whole thing or not. Probably the chassis and somebody else makes the box part of it. And also, I'm interested in solar too. So I decided I'd read about that some the other night, and I just do a little along. Did you know that they were buying those vehicles already? I'm trying to find something that I know that you don't already know. Or something that I just know that you don't know, but I'm having a hard time do that, but I'm gonna keep on trying. I read where, and I'm gonna have to go back and check and make sure all of the facts are right, that the sun produces enough power in 1 hour and a half, if it could be harnessed, to produce all the electricity for the U.S., at least the U.S., and it might have been a bigger area than that. I would like to see the person that figured that out, calculated it.
I was going to say, Minor probably knows them. That's right. Minor's probably already done the calculation, so.
Maybe it was about mine.
That's all the report I have for today.
An hour and a half, is that all it takes for the whole country?
To do the power for a day, the power of the United States.
For one
for a
day?
Hour and a half.
Holy.
Hour and a half, not a day. For the whole U.S. for a year.
Oh, for a year. That's what I was getting to. How long would the U.S. power be powered?
Yep. I'll check that again to make exactly sure. I read so much the other night that I couldn't remember it all, and I didn't take any notes, so I'll go back. and
Could you
check.
have them contact me at 211 Harmon Lane when they find that out?
All right, I think we're adjourned.